When you are in rapport with that from which you were intended, when you are in a state of creativity, a state of kindness, a state of love, a state of beauty, a state of receptivity, a state of abundance, when you are in those states of consciousness, you have joined the field from which you originated, and intention and you have become synonymous. And anything that you put your attention on with that rapport has to materialize into the physical world. It has to. Because that's how everything is created. And any moment in your life in which you are in a state of anger, hatred, or fear, grief, or anything that is not what the field from which you originally came is like, is a moment in which what you want to attract into your life is impossible. You have a choice. You can either be right and live by your ego, or you can be kind. You can either be angry or you can be love. And at every moment, in 10 Secrets for Success, the 10th secret says, wisdom is avoiding every thought that weakens you. Back in the 18th century, there was a practice in the world called slavery going on. And there was a man named John Newton who was 22 years old, and he was a slave captain, ship captain. And he was bringing a load of human cargo from Senegal in West Africa to South Carolina, 125 human beings to be sold into slavery in this hideous and nefarious practice that was so widespread in the 18th and early 19th centuries in the world. And John Newton was in the midst of a storm, and he thought he was going to die and he was going to lose his life and the lives of all of the people on this cargo in the ship. And he took out an envelope, and on this envelope he wrote down the words to a song. He said, "I once was lost, and now I'm found." It's in a moment that we call an epiphany, a moment in which we reach something called siddhi consciousness, a satori, they call it in Japanese, a satori, which is an instant awakening. And he realized in that moment, as he was writing these words to this song down on the back of this envelope, that what he was doing was in violation of the universal mind from which he originated, that it was against the laws of the universe to treat any other human being or any other creatures of life. Now the storm passed, and he survived, but he looked on that piece of paper that he had written these words on, and he turned his ship around, and he went back to Africa, and he released the 125 people that he had in those holds, and he went back to England, and for the next 55 years, until his 77th birthday, he became the most ardent abolitionist in the world, speaking out against the evils of slavery. In one instant, in Zen Buddhism, they say, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. When you have that level of readiness, whatever you need, as it says in A Course in Miracles, if you knew who walked beside you at all times on this path that you have chosen, you could never experience fear or doubt again. It would never be there for you. For those of you who've decided to quit smoking, it will be easy, because you will have guidance there for you at every moment that you ever are tempted to go back, or whatever it is that you want to attract into your life. And the words to that song became perhaps the most spiritual song ever recorded. It's called Amazing Grace. I once was lost, and now I'm found. And it was grace that taught my heart to feel. It was grace. It was God. It was returning to source that turned everything around.
Health is not something that you need to acquire. It is something you already have. Don't interfere with it, particularly with your beliefs. It is important to recognize that this applies to all of your relationships as well. If any human relationship you are in is unsatisfactory in any way, be certain that you are not compounding the problem by continuing to give energy to the aspects that you dislike. For example, when someone says they don't get along with their parents or their spouse, they are defining the relationship in terms of what they dislike. It is impossible to live with her, there's always arguing, there's no respect for me, and so on. If you find you do this, begin to raise your energy level and remind yourself that relationships are exclusively experienced in your thoughts. Shift those thoughts upwards in frequency to the level of spiritual consciousness and bring that to the relationship. For you, the person doing the upgrade in vibration, the relationship will change regardless of how anyone else reacts, and also the problem in the relationship will disappear. How many times have you heard the words, "I can't help it, this is the way I was taught to do this," or words to this effect? Many of the problems that we face are due to our being attached to the way we've always done things. Suppose you have a mindset which has produced a host of failures. These problems might involve a series of failed relationships in which you end up continuing to feel victimized. Or they might be the result of addictive behavior that persists despite having changed the substances you've craved over the years. Or you may have a pattern of being wasteful with your finances. Or perhaps you've experienced one chronic illness after another, even though the places on your body take turns being the troublesome spots. We are subjected to many illusions in our daily life. The greatest one is the one which keeps us trapped in giving our energy to what has always been. This illusion is characterized by the belief that the past is the reason why I'm continuing to believe in these ways. I have referred to the wake of a fast-moving boat. The wake is the trail that is left behind, and nothing more. The wake cannot drive the boat. The wake of your life does not drive your body. But the present moment energy that you put into the events of your past, explaining or excusing your continuing problems, does affect your life today. And that is the source of those problems. The second factor that keeps us producing those unwanted problems is our love of wallowing around in the dramas of our past and using our inner energy to remind ourselves and anyone who will listen of all that created the problems we experience today. No one said it better or more succinctly than William Shakespeare when he reminded us, "What's done is done." Many of your so-called problems are present today because you are caught up in your personal history. Know in your heart that everything in your wake had to take place in order for you to be where you are today. And what is my evidence for making such a statement? Everything did take place, period. Rather than cursing it, bless it and bring love and acceptance to it. There's no shortage of folks out there who will let you know how they expect you to think, feel, and behave. Now suppose that you are filled with deep resentment about how those people are continually reminding you of their expectations for you. The antidote for resolving this problem is a spiritual one. You must learn to increase your energy vibrations from the low range of anger and resentment to the higher ranges of kindness, love, and forgiveness. The moment that you no longer react with that low energy, the illusion of your problem will disappear. I observed an 18-year-old friend of one of our daughters talking to his mother on the telephone. As he hung up the phone in frustration, he said, "She makes me so angry. She's always telling me what to think and where to go and how to do things." He was obviously upset. I told him he had two choices. He could either continue to practice being right or practice being kind. If you insist on being right, you will argue, get frustrated, angry, and your problems will persist with your mom, I explained. If you simply practice being kind, you can remind yourself that this is your mom. She's always been that way. She will very likely stay that way. But you're going to send her love instead of anger when she starts in with her routine. A simple statement of kindness such as, "That's a good point, Mom. I'll think about it." And you have a spiritual solution to your problem. When you need to be right, you stay invested in the world of low energy. When you practice being kind, you bring a spiritual essence to the illusion of a problem, and amazingly, it just disappears. Gratitude is your expression of acknowledging the oneness of the universal energy working in cooperation with your desires. Let's look at the nature of gratitude. Gratitude is the complete and full response of the human heart to everything in the universe. It is the absence of feeling alienated or separate. It represents our full acknowledgement and appreciation of the energy flowing through all things and brings gifts to us in the form of the fulfillment of our desires. Gratitude recognizes that nothing is to be taken for granted, and, most important, it is an expression of complete, unconditional love in the form of a thank you to the God Force that is in all things. It is a way of being one with the God Force in full inner serenity. It recognizes that the spirit within ourselves is the same as that which sustains all life on the planet. Gratitude then represents the whole of ourselves. When we feel grateful and give thanks, sending out this kind of loving energy to the world in the same fashion that we did when we were asking for our heart's desire to be manifested, we feel complete. Gratitude allows us to feel more connected to that for which we are grateful. Gratitude acknowledges that we are the recipients of the generosity of others, of life, and of the universal spirit. Gratitude contributes a loving response to the whole of creation and to your relationships with creation. That relationship illustrates for us how interconnected and interdependent everything is, including the manifestations in our lives. When we understand the nature of gratitude, we can more clearly identify those things within ourselves that are obstacles to practicing gratitude. Gratitude is an inner process. It is an attitude of thankfulness, even when things do not appear as we would prefer. Rumi once wrote, "Don't grieve for what doesn't come. Some things that don't happen keep disasters from happening." Gratitude is a way of experiencing the world with love rather than judgment. The three most common obstacles to an attitude of gratitude originate in your mental processes. The first is simply called fault-finding. You always have the choice to be love-finding or fault-finding. The fault-finder focuses on what is wrong and what is missing. That focus shows up as criticism, judgment, and anger. The feeling is of being against the manifestations that appear in the world rather than being for what one receives. As we think, so shall we be. If you are using your mind to think about what is wrong and what is lacking, this is precisely what will manifest for you. Finding fault, rather than being grateful and being a love finder, guarantees that you will not be able to participate in the co-creation of your life and the fulfillment of your desires. A second obstacle to an attitude of gratitude is called simply complaining. The complainer always feels shortchanged and deprived and consequently becomes envious and bitter toward those who seem to have been blessed with what is missing in his or her own life. The inner experience of complaining leads to being angry at the universal source that seems to have denied you the benefit of its infinite supply. Complaining is an expression of the absence of love in your inner world. When you feel love, there's no room for being upset with God for not delivering your ego's demands. And the third obstacle to an attitude of gratitude is taking what you have for granted. Taking things and people in your life for granted drains you of the joy that you could be experiencing. Taking things for granted means going through life unaware of the multitude of gifts that are here in each and every moment. Think of the activities and experiences that would be missed if they suddenly disappeared. Remind yourself that there are no ordinary moments. Kicking a ball around with a child, watching the shape of the clouds in the early morning, or hearing the sounds of the seasons, saying goodnight to a loved one. Every single experience is an opportunity to experience gratitude, or its opposite, ennui. It is also a choice. Strive to be alert to being a love finder. Sleepwalking through life is a choice to impede the gratitude that is necessary for you to become a manifester. If you take everything for granted, you will never be able to see the clues that will give you the impetus to take action on your desired manifestation. The appearance of the right person or the unexpected gift will be greeted with a shrug and a disinterest, which will prevent you from receiving its blessings. Be awake and fully appreciative of everything and everyone. And here appreciation and depreciation need to be understood. When we depreciate something, we devalue or diminish its worth. We depreciate things or people by expressing disapproval or dislike. It is impossible to feel grateful for something or someone we do not value. Begin to see things and people as they truly are. Each person is a child of God. See the unfolding of God in each person you meet. The moment you participate in the depreciation process, you block your ability to experience gratitude, and consequently, you obstruct your ability to manifest prosperity, love, and joy into your life. Essentially, the activity of depreciation means that you are not sensing the beauty of life. Become an appreciator and therefore a manifester by seeing the Christ shining back at you in the other person or groups of people. Cultivating an attitude of gratitude is something we all want to work on in this manifesting process. Make the shift to being grateful for all that you are and all that you have, and you will facilitate your ability to manifest into your life the essence of all that you desire. Develop an awareness of yourself as a recipient rather than as a victim. Be thankful and avoid complaining as much as possible. Catch yourself as you are about to find fault with someone or some condition. Then, instead, find something to say that reflects a willingness to be a love finder. Give yourself a specific period of time to practice avoiding complaining and fault-finding, perhaps 30 days. You will experience the emptying of rancor and complaints from your inner self and the opening to love, appreciation, and gratitude. Begin each and every day with an expression of gratitude and thanksgiving. Every morning when you awake, you have been given the gift of a sunrise and 24 hours to live. Take in a deep breath and be grateful for this exhilarating experience of breathing in life and love. End your day with an expression of love and a repetition of the word for peace, shalom. Be aware of the need to be grateful for the suffering and struggles that are part of the fabric of your life. Sometimes it's easy to simply be angry at your suffering rather than to know that it is the catalyst for your searching and awakening. And also remember, it is the nature of thought to increase. The more your thoughts are centered on what is missing, the more deficient you feel and the more complaints you will utter. Similarly, the more you practice gratitude, the more you are thankful and appreciative of all that life provides, and the more you feed your experience of abundance and love. Thank you, God. I see you working in my life, and I acknowledge with love my appreciation for all that you bring to me.
People who are grateful seem to get more than people who are resentful. You know why? Because people who are resentful don't understand that their resentment itself is what's blocking. And when they do get something, their instantaneous response to it is, it's not enough. It's not big enough. Somebody else got something that's better. I should have had this. I wanted it yesterday. I showed up too late. It's not the right color. It's not the right size. You know. This idea is not just good citizenship we're talking about here. It's cultivating this attitude of flow, of allowing, of permitting things to continue to grow in you, because gratitude is love. Now, the hardest part about gratitude for most people is the understanding that you have to also be grateful when things don't show up. And you have to learn, this is the toughest part, you have to learn to be grateful for that which you don't have, and for the suffering that you are going through, and for the experiences of scarcity that seem to be present in your life. Because in essence, until you can be grateful in these moments and understand that you can't have sobriety, generally speaking, without having known its opposite. Everything in the physical plane has its opposite. People who have been through addictions generally know and appreciate and are grateful for those addictions when they transcend them. You won't find very many alcoholics who are in recovery who will say, I resent my addiction days. Instead, what they say is, they were the greatest teachers I ever had. And I couldn't be where I am today without having had those. Now, this is true for all of our experiences. When people say to me, can you really say that you are grateful that your father walked out of your life when you were just a baby? Can you really say that the time that he spent in prison, and the fact that he never sent any money, and the fact that you had to spend early years in foster homes and so on, and away from the rest of your family, can you really say that you're grateful for that? I say, my father was my greatest teacher. I never met the man. But without my experience of learning to rely upon myself as a young boy, I couldn't, as a grown man, be teaching self-reliance today. Couldn't do it. Because to learn to rely upon yourself is something that you have to have the direct conscious experience of. And when you've had it, then you can teach it. And I'm grateful for it. I was having dinner last night with my oldest daughter, Tracy, and I was thinking about her mother and I
who have been divorced for 20, 25 years now. And I was telling Tracy at dinner that your mother, even though we didn't agree and didn't get along, your mother was one of the great people in my life. There are many qualities that both of us could look at in her, and she could look at in me, certainly, and say, these are the reasons why it didn't work. But you can also do the opposite. You can look at this person and say, but look at these qualities. Look at the honesty. Look at the integrity. Look at these things and remember that. And my experience being married to my daughter's mother, to Judy, those many years ago, when I was a young boy, it seems like, taught me how to be not only a better husband later on and a better father, but it gave me direct experiences of being able to transcend my own pettiness and my own inability to relate at a level that I am able to do today. Without that, I couldn't be where I am today. I've often said to people, I am what is called a reverse paranoid. You know, when you ask someone, what is a paranoid? Well, a paranoid thinks that everybody is talking about you and that they're saying terrible things about you. And a reverse paranoid is someone who knows that everybody's talking about you, but they're saying nice things about you. So when you walk by and someone says, are they talking about me? You say, yeah, of course. Why wouldn't they be? And this attitude of being able to be grateful, not just for the things that are manifesting and showing up in your life, but for the things that don't show up, and for those experiences, when you get to a point where in this moment, I can now say, okay, it didn't show up, and there's a great lesson in this, and I'll get that lesson, and then I'll stop the blockage of abundance flowing into my life. That's what gratitude is. It is the free expression of the heart to the fullness of the universe. And an understanding that you're not going to get it all, that you are it all already. You are it all already. That divine, organizing, omniscient, all-loving, unconditional loving God is in you already. And everything that you need to be peaceful, to have love, to be successful, you already have in this moment. You don't need one thing more. Anything else that shows up is just a bonus from the universe. And you ought to be grateful for all of it.
As Blaise Pascal, the French scientist, said, all of man's troubles stem from his inability to sit quietly in a room alone. All you have to do is learn how to sit quietly in a room alone to access this highest level of pure awareness that is there. And when you access it, you begin to discover that you're not alone. Meditation, going within, leaving the chatter level of your mind and going deep within, what it does is it shatters the illusion of your separateness. You begin to realize that you're connected. The connection is not physical. The connection is metaphysical. The connection is not in form. The connection is transform, beyond form. When you get that, and you go to this level, first when you start this, you discover how slimy your mind really is. And you find yourself thinking these endless thoughts and millions of them, and they go on and on and on, and you just sit there and you say, what is this? I'm not doing anything, and I'm thinking, and now I'm thinking about how stupid I am sitting here thinking, and nothing is happening, and you go through this doubt. You see, doubt is the way most of us have learned almost all the things that we learn. We don't learn from knowing. We don't learn from knowing, we learn from doubt. And so when you learn from doubt, at the quantum level, doubt affects what you are doubting. Doubt affects the observation of an object. The introduction of doubt in that observational process at the quantum level affects what you're observing. So if you can't get to knowing, like you know you can still skate, or you know you can swim, or you know you can ride a bicycle, if you can't get to that level in spiritual awareness or higher consciousness, or in manifesting abundance for yourself, or in creating fulfillment for yourself, or in healing yourself, if you can't get to the knowing level, then what you're working on is doubt. And if you maintain the doubt itself will interfere, because we're talking about now something that is not visible. It is invisible. It is beyond form. And doubt is right in there with it. So the doubt, the knowing, the surrendering, it's like when Deepak and I decided to do this together today, and whenever I come up on stage or when I write, I have this process that I go through I call surrendering. And you just get to a point where you know that you're not alone. That you have divine, invisible guidance available for you, and you go to this place and you do all that you know how to do in the world of form, and then it's like this magical, it's almost like you put all of the worries and the doubts and the fears and the anxiety and the stress and the wondering, all of that stuff, you just put it in a balloon. And you just blow it up and you tie it. And then you let it go. And you watch all of that stuff go away. And you say, I will allow the God within me, the invisible organizing intelligence that has organized me with a brain that is capable of remembering things that happened to me 20 years ago, even though I had a different brain then. I will allow that magnificent organizing intelligence that is somehow outside of my physicalness and inside it at the same time to take over. And whatever then comes my way, in the way of difficulties, in the way of problems, in the way of struggles, I will view, instead of as they shouldn't be happening, I will view as lessons, as opportunities, as something for me to learn, as reminders of the spiritual being that I can become. I will not treat it as, why is this happening to me? Because I know now that my life is nothing more than a parenthesis in eternity. It started in a moment, it was born in a night, to perish in a night, when the soul slept in beams of light endlessly. And I trust that intelligence. I wonder how many of you know that in the world of highest awareness, nothing is impossible. That it's really, I don't know if it's your story, but it is mine. And I have gotten lost on several occasions in my life. I spent a lot of years in an orphanage. I spent years struggling through addictions. I've spent years dealing with separation and divorce and the pain of that. And now leukemia. And each one of these has been almost a way for me to recognize that all spiritual advances are preceded by a fall of some kind or another. My friend Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, passed away a few years ago, used to say that if you shield the mountain from the windstorms, you'll never see the beauty of the carvings. And the storms of our life, and the storms of my life, in particular this recent one, we had talked about this earlier, about this leukemia, has brought me to just, it's brought me back to, you're calling it Source, I'm calling it God. It doesn't matter, we could call it Irene, it doesn't make any difference what we call it, because the Tao that can be named is not the Tao anyway. But what came into my life at this time, in the last couple of years with this, are just very significant people who have showed up in my life, and everyone I encounter and everything I see, everything just looks different. And it's like a return to an awareness that, I am well, I am perfect health.
That's also the same truth is in the parable in that Jesus tells of what's traditionally called the prodigal son, which actually is a very ancient parable. In different traditions it's used. You all probably know it. The son is the son of a rich father, and he goes out, he says to the father, "Give me your inheritance," and he travels to some distant land and squanders his inheritance. He becomes a beggar. In other versions of it, he even forgets who he is. He forgets that he is the son of that father. So he sits there by the roadside begging, and then the father sends messengers to him, sends out messengers to the distant country, and they find the son, and they say, "Do you know who you are?" And he says, "No." And then he begins to remember, and then he returns to the father's house, and that's what I mentioned earlier, the return movement. And then when he returns, it says the father loves him more deeply than before. And to me that means this is the story of humanity. Humanity losing itself in externals, losing connectedness with the source of all being, with the one. Not absolutely losing it, but total unawareness of it. And so we become beggars, and this is the condition of most humans who are not yet going through the spiritual awakening, which in other words is not really your condition anymore, but it's still the majority of people on the planet who are not connected consciously with the source within themselves. So they are looking for scraps for fulfillment, and scraps is anything. From the house to the car to this or that, give me a new partner, anything to give me fulfillment, to tell me who I am. So they're seeking it there and there. That's the condition of the person who has lost awareness of the source. And then perhaps what the meaning of the messengers is in the parable is perhaps a spiritual teacher or a spiritual teaching that somehow you come into contact with, or the messenger could be, as I see it, could also be just the suffering becomes so much that the pressure of it awakens you, and then you begin to realize who you are, and you return then. That means you suddenly become aware again of that deep connectedness with being, your essential oneness with being. And the meaning of what the parable says, that is loved more deeply by the Father, I interpret that as meaning that when you regain awareness of being, which perhaps humans had a long, long time ago in the distant past, and that could be the reason for all the myths in many, many cultures of the golden age. Right. In many cultures on the planet, you have different versions of the myth of there was once a golden age when people lived in happiness, and that perhaps points to our original connectedness with Source. Then we lost it. This was our up to very recently, and now returning to the home, the Father's home, means to regain that awareness, but at a deeper level, because whereas before it was in your natural state, you may know from your own life when you have lost something, and then you come back to it, you appreciate it much more deeply.
If your prayer is you talking to God, your intuition is God talking to you. It's God talking to you. It's the presence of higher frequencies and higher energy saying to you, listen to me, pay attention. There's an accident coming.
Slow down. That person in front of you who's going slow, thank them for slowing you down. Because if you would have gone around them, you'd have had a head-on collision. Or there's somebody waiting up there to give you a ticket. How many times if you wanted to get around somebody, you want to get around, and you say, oh well, and you stay, and then you look up there, and there's somebody sitting up there with one of those little ticket guns, ready to hand you a ticket from a radar reading. That person was put in front of you to slow you down. And it's not an accident. Now, here's the weirdest. I'm giving a talk the next day on you don't have to have accidents. It's 5 o'clock in the morning and I'm out running. And while I'm out running, I trip over a curb that someone placed in the middle of the road. I don't know how they did it, but during the middle of the night, they raised the sidewalk this much. At least that's the way it seemed to me, because it had never been there before. It was out in front of my own home. And all of a sudden, like this, and I go into that slowed down time thing I was talking about before, and I see, but I was sprinting, because the last 3 or 4 minutes of my run, I usually sprint. And I'm sprinting, and I hit that thing, and I'm going very fast, and it's all concrete, asphalt. And I see that I am about to land my head on it, and I can see it in my arm and my side and my face, and I'm tumbling on the cement at 5 o'clock in the morning. And I get up, and I finish my run, and I walk into the house, and my wife thinks that I've been attacked by a polar bear. Because that's how I looked. Blood down my face, scabs, were going to be forming, and I'm giving a talk the next day on how to avoid having accidents and moving into higher consciousness, all right? So when I was giving the talk and I got to this point, and then I started pointing out all of the things, on my hips and my legs and then over here and my face and so on. And I said to them, look, I was at 100,000 cycles per second. I was really connected to spirit while I was running. I had been meditating. And then we have been having a problem with one of our daughters who has been taking a different path in her life than what has been comfortable for us. And she has experimented with drugs and drinking and has had a head-on collision and had to be cut out of a car, and she now had gone back into some more of that kind of behavior when we thought that was past us. And I was running and I was thinking about her and worried about her and consumed with fear for her. And when I went into that fear mode and I got very, very frightened and very upset and very hurt, is when I tripped over that thing. And when you leave 100,000, 80,000, 70, and you move into these lower frequencies, and accidents occur when you shift back into the place where there are accidents at 20,000 cycles per second. If you can sense yourself in fear, in stress, in shame, in anxiety, in all of these kinds of awarenesses, and move out of them and get yourself back to God, to spirit, to love, to higher and faster energy, you can avoid all of these things. And when they happen, again, take responsibility for them without guilt. Not going around telling myself, I had this accident and I'm being punished and all of that. No. But that I now have the results in my body of this action, and I'm taking responsibility for getting rid of it. And I can't take responsibility for getting rid of it unless I take responsibility for having it. Not with guilt, but with your sense of everything that happens to me, I have something to learn from. Thank you, God. Thank you, God. Thank you for all of these struggles and tough times and accidents to remind me to move and stay in a higher place. The lowest frequencies are the frequencies that we call solid. And as we move out of the solid frequencies, remember that our eyes, our ears, these are the senses that pick up the energy and give us the information. As we move beyond the senses or into the higher senses like sound and light, we're moving into faster energies. So we've got solid, and then we've got this intermediate dimension called sound, and then we've got light, and then ultimately we move into the very fastest and highest frequencies of all, called spirit. And these very high and very fast frequencies are energies. And they are accessed by using your intuition and your insight, and largely through meditation and getting quiet and making conscious contact with God.